let me know afterwards. Just let me know afterwards if you have any doubts about that or change your minds before I share it with the network as a whole. So I'll hand over to you then, Nicoletta Mandolini. Thank you very much for joining us to talk, I think, about your work on graphic novels and girlhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. And thank you all. It's always a pleasure to participate in these meetings, to see so many familiar faces. I want to start apologizing because my English is getting a bit arrugginito because I live in Portugal at the moment, so I don't know. Please apologize if I make mistakes and whatever. First of all, I wanted to let you know that girlhood is not really the main focus of my research. And in the past, let's say, 7-8 years, I've been working mainly on gender-based violence and representations of gender-based violence. This is my main topic of research. And I started with literature and journalism, Italian literature and journalism, and then I moved, as Danielle said, to comics and graphic novels. And it is precisely when I moved to comics and graphic novels that I encountered girlhood and representation of girlhood and girls more. This is because comics and graphic novels notoriously entertain a privileged relationship with youth, especially with boyhood, but not only with boyhood, with girlhood as well. It's not a coincidence that when I first approached graphic novels, I approached graphic novels because I was looking for ideas, let's say, to write a postdoctoral research project, and I came across during my PhD, which was on the representation of femicide in Italian literature. I see Silvia Rossi here was my supervisor. I came across a couple of graphic novels on femicide, and not by coincidence, these graphic novels were non-fictional representations of femicide and had girls, precisely girls, as protagonists. One of these is Io So Carmela, which is published by Becco Giallo, which is a pretty famous graphic novels publisher in Italy. The other one is called Roberta Lanzino Ragazza. This is how I approached girlhood and graphic novels in the first place. Then later, during the course of my research on representations of gender violence in graphic novels and comics in Italy and beyond, I continued, let's say, to encounter representations of girlhood and girls. One of these I recently wrote an article on Fumetti Brutti. Fumetti Brutti is one of the, I don't know if any of you know her, but is one of the main superstars of the Italian fumetto. Today is a transgender woman who came out with a graphic novel which is entitled P, la mia adolescenza trans. And interestingly enough, this graphic novel really tells the story of her girlhood as a transsexual girl, as a transsexual adolescent. Then I continued encountering girls in my research, and in particular, I would say that what I noticed, at least in the representation of graphic novels and comics, is that girlhood is represented as a continuing and never-ending process of self-construction, and most of the times we can find girls even in characters or first-person autobiographical narratives that have adults or young women as their focus. This is because girlhood kind of continues. Women never really grow up to a certain stage. I will interview in a few days Alice Sokal, with another Italian comic artist who is now living and working in Berlin. I'm interviewing her in the context of because I'm writing an article on transnational representations of girlhood and youth in Italian graphic narratives. And Alice Sokal is an example. She represents herself as a mother. mother. She has 2 kids. Her representations are generally autobiographical, but she generally represents herself as surrounded with puppets. So with a lot of let's say symbols of childhood and girlhood. So this is about my research more broadly, but I also wanted, I know Eva van de Ville is not here today, but she presented her work in the last session, and I wanted to introduce you briefly to a project that I'm trying to carrying out with together with Eva and together with Maya Lisa Quagliani Manuzzato. Is a project for a special issue which is provisionally titled Boundless Girlhood in Comics Between Transmediality and Transnationalism, and which we intend to publish, if it will be accepted, with Girlhood Studies. And I want to let you know how the project started and what it is about. So its aims, its general aims. It started because Eva, Maya, and I, together with other 5 people, we founded in 2020 now, yeah, I think, a research group on Italian comics for, let's say, early career researchers, which is called SNIF, Studying and Investigating Fumetti. So we participate, we are active members of this group, we meet regularly, and we kind of established a lot of collaborations. In the context of these collaborations, I participated in a conference that I've organized at Ghent University, and which kind of resulted in the publication of an edited volume called Sugar, Spice, and the Not So Nice on Girlhood and Graphic Narratives, published by Leuven University Press. So now this special issue, well, this edited volume is a general edited volume on girlhood and comics. We would like to kind of go a bit further and try to investigate this relationship between girlhood and graphic novels in a more detailed manner. So as the title of our provisional title of our special issue suggests, we would like to focus on transmediality and transnationalism. And why so? Because transmediality is let's say, is a concept that is generally associated to comics, because comics scholarship in comic studies have investigated that and unanimously kind of agreed on that. Is a really malleable medium, really adaptable. Remediations or transmedial experimentations that result in the creation of story worlds are examples of this type of adaptability of comics. Or the Marvel DC Comics adaptation into movies, for example, is a notorious, pretty well-known example of this. And so we would like to understand how girlhood as a concept has been constructed through these transmedial operations, and not only like we would like to establish some sort of conceptual or theoretical link between transmediality and the idea of transmediality in comics, the adaptability, malleability of comics, and the idea of malleability and adaptability or plasticity, as some scholars have suggested, that characterizes girlhood. And transnationalism, because of course the Anglocentric, let's say, approach that generally dominates the analysis in cultural studies of representations of comics, as many other representations of girlhood and not only girlhood, is something that we definitely want to challenge to some extent, and we want to recognize the interrelationships, even at the transnational level, that allow these constructions of girlhoods to circulate at a wider level. So this is in a nutshell, our project is not, of course, exclusively focused on the Italian context, but we will be happy to circulate it with the network. So if anybody is interested in submitting a proposal, we would be super happy to consider it.
Thank you, Nicoletta. Thank you. That was super clear. Your English doesn't sound at all rusty to me. And you have a beautiful Irish lilt as well to boot. So thank you. Great to hear about this, about both your work and the work with colleagues on the transnational, in particular in relation to this idea of plasticity, which I think I've read about in the work of Heather Warren Crow, in particular, which I think is really, really great and lends itself very well to the graphic novel.
It's definitely the one I was implicitly referring to.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks. So we'll maybe move on to Ellen and Nicoletta Marini-Maio, and then open the floor up for questions. We should have a nice half hour. I'm sure people will have lots of questions for you about those graphic novels. So thanks very much, Nicoletta. Nicoletta Marini-Maio, do you want to try?
Yes, to share the
Yeah.
presentation, right? Okay. Yes. To share the sound, and the presentation is this. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
Okay,
Thank you.
so yeah, and I will start with sharing the information about our project, and then Ellen and I will alternate as we usually do when we present on the Wings Club, because this is a specific project we want to share today about cuteness in the Wings Club, which is a development of what we've been doing about the Wings Club in the last few months. So, of course, today's presentation is part of a project which is entitled La Nazione Wings, Educare la Futura Consumista, which means Wings Nation, Grooming the Future Female Consumer. Wings Club, for those of you who may not know about it, is a globally distributed animated television series created in 2004 by Eugenio Straffi, co-founder and CEO of Rainbow. Wings Club derives from the magical girl subgenre of the Japanese anime and manga and Harry Potter. It follows a group of teenage fairies who, like Harry and company, learn to harness the power of their magic as they make their way through adolescence. Across 8 seasons, and the 9th season is scheduled for release this spring, the series explores Bloom and her fairy friends as they combat evil and date the boys from the nearby boarding school. Our principal interest is in the ways that this audiovisual text and its surrounding semiotic empire, in concert with its galaxy of goods, grooms its largely, but not exclusively, girl audience to consume. Our book project engages in a 360 degrees analysis of the text as a way to illuminate the creation of consumer desire. Wings Club ambition to saturate audiovisual markets for girls and tweens can be traced to its concurrent 2004 debut as comic book and TV series. It was subsequently adapted for the US market in a variety of production scenarios, and over the past 20 years has become a global brand. The series is broadcast extensively in the West and in all Hispanic-speaking countries, as well as Russia, Eastern Europe, and China, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and the MENA region, as you can see in detail. The televisual text has multiplied with spin-offs, Netflix US Wow, The World of Wings in summer 2008 and spring 2019, and a live-action young adult series, which some of you may have seen on Netflix recently, Fate, which in Italian sounds like Fate, the fairies, the Wings saga, with 2 seasons again. There have also been 3 globally released feature-length films, as you can read here. I think it's worth mentioning that 2 of them have been ranked 7th and 10th place in the top 10 most popular Italian films distributed globally between 2007 and 2016. So to maximize transnational appeal, Winx cleverly mines contemporary Hollywood and pop music female stardom with an eye toward representing ethnic and racial diversity and bringing together Charlie's Angels and Disney's Musketeers. The Winx were inspired by Britney Spears, Lucy Liu, Beyoncé Knowles, Jennifer Lopez, Pink, and Cameron Diaz. The Winx project, as we refer to this multiverse, illuminates the extensive galaxy designed for youthful consumers, whether or not they are under the age of 12. The eternal juvenilization, as Tom Lamar has called it, or the juvenescence that Robert Harrison has observed, is an element we are interested in capturing in our study. Part of the successful bid for the consumer attention of juvenile females relies on the concept of cuteness. The Winx text performs a deliberate reconciliation of two global tectonic blocks in the animation industry, that is, Japan, the anime of Japan, and Disney. We exclude Pixar here for historical reasons. So this industrial reconciliation is not limited to style and design. Rather, Straffi focuses on the anima of animation or its soul. Straffi explicitly sought una terza via, a third way that would reconcile in a female animated figure the acceptance of social hierarchy representative of Japanese Shintoism and the brash iconoclastic brand of American exceptionalism and narcissism. As we have detailed elsewhere in this article, Angelification of Girls, the Winx project is informed by and performs within a strand of Italian Catholicism invested in civic duty, social welfare, and activism. Our work aims to illuminate the ethical, pedagogical, and socioeconomic project that lies at the heart of the Winx Club and the battle it wages for the soul of girls. As a case study, Winx Club permits multiple perspectives on girls, girlhood, fantasy, and fandom, girl power, and participatory culture. A conceptual frame deriving from post-feminist media studies helps our examination. And we are happy to talk about this further. Ellen?
As we mentioned in the beginning, the book is entitled La Nazione Winx, Educare la Futura Consumista, or Winx Nation, Grooming the Future Female Consumer. Let's turn briefly some attention to these key terms. What do we mean when we say La Nazione Winx, or Winx Nation? Nations are not natural, rather they are constructed. We conceive of the Winx global fandom as such a constructed, imagined community. Winx Club and its commodity empire create affective communities in which desire, symbols, products, and fandom coalesce in the type of imagined community akin to the nation proposed by Charles Taylor, Montserrat Goubernau, and others, Benedict Anderson very memorably. Our fan surveys, administered globally in the 2019-2021 biennial, reveal the inner workings of a nostalgic enterprise designed, at least in as much as the fans understand it, to work across generations of fans, maintaining the interest of longtime consumers while stimulating growth in new markets of little girls. It's kind of a terrible locution, new markets of little girls, but I hope you'll just allow me that as a shortcut right now. The Winx promise and sell the myth of a global nation composed of children, both boys and girls, drawn by the evergreen attraction of combating evil, doing good, and vanquishing foes by way of secret powers, all achieved, if possible, while sporting the latest fashions. La Nazione Winx aims to illuminate in all its fullness and complexity the ethical, pedagogical, and socioeconomic project that lies at the heart of the Winx Club and the battle it wages for the souls of girls, as Nico was observing. The second part of our title, Educare la Futura Consumista, signals our interest in the way the Winx project participates in the global context and economy of affective communities, marketing, fandom, and nostalgia. As we mentioned, we're interested in a 360-degree analysis of the Winx as a cultural and commercial phenomenon. Our focus trains on the ways Winx Club promotes female friendship in order to monetize it. In contemporary postmodern and post-feminist societies, female friendships are shaped on foundational activities that provide common ground and nurture connection. Consumer socialization is but one in a set of practices practices that make consumption, frequently but not only of fashion and clothing, a basis for bonding, while entrenching female friendship, especially between girls, in the ethics and rhetorics of neoliberalism. We are currently studying the way that conceptions of cuteness undergird the Winx Club's strategies for stimulating and appealing to affectivity and their girl consumers. We're interested in the corporeal figurations and affective bonds that cuteness elicits in the evolutions of Winx Club across time, formats, and platforms. We're probably not going to have time to discuss all these concepts today, but just so that you can have an idea of them, we're focusing on first locating Winx cuteness. As you can see from the slide, these are our interests. First, drawing upon theories of cuteness or kawaii and affect theory, we discuss how Winx Club at once subscribes to and veers away from a classic sense of cute. The evolution of the cuteness of the Winx, or Winx's cuteness. We're interested here in the ways that cuteness is extracted or excised from the animation and character design of the fairies as the seasons progress and the audiovisual text fragments into multiple projects. That happens with the different iterations of the seasons, of the formats, of the spin-offs, of the prequels, of the post-quel, and that sort of thing. Cute, we argue, signals the hybridized tween of the Winx, the perennial teenaged girl who, like Peter Pan, never grows up and lives constantly in the ambivalent space of sexualized innocence. 3, cuteness by proxy, ancillary happy objects. We show how global representations of cuteness are retained as an ancillary aim represented in the menagerie of cute animals and hybrid beings with whom the Winx bond or pair. And then 2 other categories, fables. I have fables of cuteness, commodity, aesthetic and enchantment, and affective communities. Nico, why don't you take it from here?
Yes. So starting from locating Winx's cuteness, since their first appearing on TV in 2004, the Winx aesthetic generated enormous attraction among tweens and teens, and consequently elicited harsh reactions from adults, not only parents, and critics. This was inevitable. Central to the Winx physicality are some of the defining elements of the kawaii aesthetic, the cuteness or the carino. Note that both the English and Italian translations simplify the Japanese original term. The carino, the cuteness, is connected to a sexiness that cannot be ignored, especially for a media product that is aimed to a public of children, tweens, and teens. It seems to us that the Winx's physical attributes are an extreme realization of what Virginia Postrel defines as the aesthetic imperative, that is, attention towards the popularization of beauty started in the modern era, which encourages the public to become smart and pretty, thus acquiring the abilities, the pleasures, and the expectations once reserved only to a courtesan elite. The beautiful bodies generate desire, pleasure, and inspiration, while Postrel argues, also eliciting opposition and anxieties. This is historically demonstrable in the moral panic among adults that Straffy's fairies engendered. Kawaii is a Japanese style dating to the Edo era, the 17th century, basically, illustrated in images and prints. It reached full maturity in the 1970s and came to dominate Japanese popular culture in the 1980s, after which it also became popular in other parts of Asia and Europe. Kawaii, as Pellitteri observes, describe the sensations evoked by society's youngest and weakest subjects. And the malleability of girls come to mind at this point, maybe in a sort of vulnerable meaning. The concept of kawaii synthesizes a series of aesthetic, gender, psychological, and commercial attributes that range from cute to sweet, from tender to infantile, from innocent to honest, from little to likable, making its way to eventually arrive to cool. But the most characteristic trait of kawaii is its relational dynamism. That is, the fact that it is not only endowed with certain inherent qualities, but that these qualities evoke an affective reaction of protection and at the same time of self-fulfilling entertainment. Kawaii constitutes a semantic field of great relevance for the wings, whose genesis, as we observed, is strongly influenced by Japanese animation. Kawaii traces in the wings include the fairies' wide eyes, childish traits, sharp voices, and reciprocal nurturing and protective attitudes, the bonding that is important to the display of their friendliness. At the same time, the wings' kawaii aesthetic is also indubitably linked to their sexiness. They swell into hourglass figures as well as fade into ethereal skinniness. Prevailingly, they have long and wavy hair, and in fact, the one fairy that does not have flowing tresses, Tecna, has been the object of fan animosity. Tecna, in fact, would deserve her own presentation, and we can't now. Seductiveness is by far the most prominent attribute and something the wings proffer with stance, gaze, and behavior. The fairies often look into the camera with a flirtatious expression and their head tilted coquettishly, bosom or out thrust as they caress their own hair, shoulder or waist with a come-either look. Fashion assists in this seduction. The latest styles the wings sport at all times highlight legs, shoulders, back, and belly. And this is just a very minimal selection. Ellen?
Right. So just briefly now, because we're running out of time, but in terms of the evolution of the Winx's cuteness, even though the Winx have transformed, take a look at the screen, across time, text, and season, they have preserved their distinctive traits of sexiness and fashion. However, whatever the iteration, the Winx are youthful and indeed are becoming progressively younger to the point of regressing to an almost infantile figuration in the last season. And the Winx evolution shows that the cuteness of the fairies works inside the textual diegesis with its plot and corporeal figurations, as well as outside of it, that is within a contextualized local and global value system, alternately transforming, conforming, monetizing them. In other words, the Winx's cuteness makes money for Rainbow, but transforms cuteness into a pedagogical and moral mission. We mentioned Eugenio Straffi's desire to chart a third way, una terza via, that strives to reconcile industrial animation processes with the soul. As part of this reconciliation, the Winx multiverse locates at the borders what we think of as commonly cute. Representations of this include a recognizable menagerie of wide-eyed, mythic, and anthropomorphized animals, and animal mixes like unicorns, digbees, fish bibble, some of whose deliberate hybridization is evident also in these names. If those were not cute enough, in season 7, the Winx also have miniatures of themselves, little mini-me's, and the miniaturized versions of these animals and still others. To fans' chagrins, as our surveys determined, paired with the Winx were tiny creatures called pixies, and the fans really did not enjoy the pixies, and Rainbow responded to this. What's significant is not so much the relegation to the borders of the commonly cute as the bonding actions that are dwelled upon repeatedly. Pixies, the animals, the pixies with the animals to the Winx's nemesis, and so forth. As go-getting superhero in fairies, the Winx are proactive, dynamic, and while they do care for each other and function as a team, they are concurrently also quite self-reliant, something our little Winxology, that's what we talked about, that's how we described our 3rd and 4th and 5th grade ethnographers, the students we interviewed in Bologna in our focus groups. We can talk more about those focus groups if people are interested. Nurturing manifests intermittently in the Winx's salvific missions to show that one does not come at the total expense of the others. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can be the neoliberal glittery girl who can do it yourself, bootstrap on your own, and also be caring, loving, and nurturing. So you can have all. You don't have to make those choices. And I'm slouching toward my conclusion now. Our conclusion in her essay on happy objects, which bears the same name, Sarah Ahmed outlines the ways in which the bonding of the object with the subject that regards and interacts with it can produce happiness. Trying to tease out the relation of affect and causality, Ahmed recurs to Nietzsche, who describes that, and I'm quoting, "A reason is sought in persons, experiences, etc., for why one feels this way or that. Processing feelings over time, the subject allows for a distance to manifest between the object causing the feeling, a nail, for example, and the feeling itself. In the case of the nail, the feeling of pain. As Ahmed observes, the object is understood retrospectively as the cause of the feeling. The object becomes a feeling cause." Ahmed's thoughts are useful as a way to frame how, thematically, even the Winks' refracted relation to commonly cute objects with which they bond is useful for its anticipatory illumination of a feeling cause for cute that produces the effect of the cute affect without actually rehearsing it. A kind of shorthand, if you like, that becomes noticeable precisely by way of the rich surround that is both visual as part of the product design and as well as the animation, as well as temporal across 7 seasons, 20 years, spin-offs, live actions, and prequels. So there's this enchantment, and I'm going to really wrap this up here. Enchantment links these objects to the function of cuteness and commodity aesthetics that Anne Allison argues offers consumers the intimacy of friendship as they cultivate a drive for acquisition. In consumer fetishism, per Joyce Goggin in an article, Affective Marketing. This aura of fancy and make-believe, Goggin observes, is instrumental in establishing a closeness between product and consumer. These cute, enchanting objects, as Sean Nye has pointed out, are eminently buyable and amenable to consumer desires. The aesthetic of cuteness has illustrated, as Laurie Marish observes, consumer empathy. It courts consumer empathy, generating structure of emotional response that assimilates consumption into a logic of adoption. The invitation to, as the Winks say, if you want to join us, become one of us, is the promise that you can possess the magic if you acquire the magical objects, the talismans, the gizmos, the gadgets, the easy bake ovens, and so forth. So we conclude. I hope we haven't overstayed our welcome here. Oh, okay, sorry for that. And that's where we're going to conclude today. And really happy to, interesting parallels between these two presentations that have to do with transmedial and transnational girlhood as they play out in different animated representations, whether it's still in terms of the fumetti or in television, if it's a moving image in terms of TV series, for example.
And please accept my apologies because this slide actually should have been titled number 4, Commodity Aesthetic and Enchantment. So I forgot about that. Made mistake.
Thanks, Nicoletta and Ellen, for a wonderful presentation. You certainly didn't overstay your welcome. It was really fascinating to hear about this project. It's incredibly rich, and I'm sure people would have questions. But I wonder actually first whether our speakers have questions for one another, because Ellen alluded there at the end towards overlap between and definitely a common interest certainly emerging in terms of plasticity and the transnational. Perhaps, Ellen, I don't know whether you have a question for Nicoletta Mandolini, or
sure, I do. I mean, I think that you were just leading into that, Danielle, and I think that Nicoletta, I mean, are you and your team interested in tracing plasticity as it might be a welcome? What do I want to say? Like a welcome indicator, index for the, you said the malleability of girls, but I'm thinking also of the way that, at least for the Winks, that the malleability, it's this product that grows and adapts over time so that it can be constantly appealing to a wide swath of consumers. So I was wondering about nostalgia and plasticity, and girls who might engage with comic book reading when they're younger, and how they might how they view the nostalgia of that reading process or that engagement as they got older.
Yeah, like as you said, there are many links, of course, between plasticity can be interpreted like we're interested mostly in seeing how plasticity is in describing in a descriptive approach. So how actually the plasticity of comics and the plasticity of girlhood do intersect and do contribute together to the creation of girlhood. These, as your presentation cleverly showcased, like definitely has something to do as well with consumerism, of course, which is totally interesting for us. I think like I didn't know that that our presentations were so intertwined. And I don't know if Danielle knew, but like it definitely worked. Like I think that your case study is definitely an example of what I was trying to say, an example of let's say almost a story word, the transmedial and transnational story word that starting from comics, because Wings were comics first and then were adapted into an animation, like expands geographically and mediatically. So this is super interesting. I'm not sure I'm totally able to reply to the question about nostalgia. If Eva was here, like she would have definitely been able. This is precisely because I'm new to comics and definitely new to girlhood. So like, and nostalgia is definitely not something that I'm looking at in depth. But of course, we all know that comics do entertain a very important relationship with nostalgia, a relationship that has been challenged in recent years by comic scholarship to some extent, and even with the advent of the graphic novel, which does not really, because it's not a serial format, foster this idea of nostalgia. But it's definitely something that is pertinent when it comes to comics and girlhood.
Thanks, Nicoletta. Nicoletta, Marini-Maio, I don't know whether there's anything you wanted to ask or suggest at this point before.
Yes, I mean, going further on the intersections between our two projects, actually, I've been thinking of this kind of the different levels of plasticity in which actually the wings actually are working. So one is the geographical. There are many changes, also because of the transnationality of the wings. So we spoke with the production team, and they said that actually because of the MENA countries being involved as audiences, they had to change even the fashion. I mean, the centimeters of skin to cover, and even the infantilization of the wings a little bit in the last seasons, and I think this is relevant. So the geographic, which intersects with the aesthetic, and then the gender issue, because the audiences of the wings are not only girls in a sort of kind of conservative and traditional definitions, but girls by self-definition. So we have a very ample audience, which is comprised of people who were not born as girls, but they are self-declared girls, self-identified as girls. So that's a very, very consistent audience for the wings. So again, going back to the malleability of the idea of girls and the identification with the wings. And so I wonder whether in terms of audience and geographical extension, this is something that happens with your study, Nicoletta?
Yes, definitely. Like again, Eva would be the person. She definitely works on these topics. But in terms of, I'm not sure if this is a case of adaptability, but I have a case that I can mention that has to do with gender-based violence and its representations. Is an Indian project called Priya Shakti. Is a response to a gang rape that happened in New Delhi in 2001, very famous one. It has a kind of worldwide resonance, and it's mainly comics based. So the production, which is a huge production, mainly Indian based, but not only, I will tell you in a minute, produced a few comics, a few zines that are available online, that were printed and whatever, with at the center a character of a young woman, let's say, who is a survivor of gender violence, who, with the help of the goddess, the Indian god, the Hindu goddess Parvati, struggles against gender violence and helps potential or victims of rape mostly to face and to survive. This project is pretty interesting both at a transmedial and at a transnational level, because it starts from comics, but it uses many other let's say mediatic kind of technologies and instruments. Augmented reality is one of these, even street art, and especially with augmented reality, I think this is interesting at a transnational level, because and in terms of adaptability as well, because it while reading the comics online, if you have an app that allows you to see things through augmented reality, you can access on additional contents. These additional contents most of the times are videos, and some of these are dedicated to other forms of gender violence happening, like widespread at a global level, but mostly widespread in some specific parts of the world that are not India. And for example, acid attacks, which are prominent in Central America. And then afterwards, this kind of operation, this kind of transmedial operation that was integrated in the simple, let's say, comic kind of trasbordato and became an additional comic. So an additional comic from Priya Shakti is specifically dedicated to acid attacks. So there is definitely a transnational dialogue there, and which it can be interpreted in terms of a transnational adaptation, adaptation to different contexts. I don't know if I replied to your question, like maybe not, but like. But I have a question for you, actually, because I'm thinking we're talking here about transmediality and transnationalism, but I'm really interested. I've been working recently on digital comics, on the adaptation in terms of platform. So the transposition or adaptation into a kind of e-comic, so web comic, or I'm talking about comic here, but can be whatever. And of course, when accessing the web is considered, like, again, by scholarship almost unanimously, a place of malleability, a place of plasticity. I'm reading now, super interesting, Joanna Walsh, A Girl Online, which extensively talks about that. And I was wondering if you look at that as well in your project on the Wings, because I suppose that there are many, let's say, spin-offs, digital web-related spin-offs of the Wings, and how you approach those.
Nico, do you want to? Well, I'll just say
that
the fan communities live online, and in fact, these are really important affective bonding that happens around these virtual hubs of fan communication, and those happens in various. I'm not the best TikToker. Nico can say something about the TikTok presence, but you find it really everywhere. You find all kinds of self-fashioning by the fans, a lot of sharing of their own art, a lot of drag shows, a lot of the kinds of things that you could imagine Facebook, if we, think about that as a platform. There are plenty of fans that are old enough to still be using Facebook as a platform for sharing and building community. So it happens everywhere. Nico, do you have anything to say?
I have something to add, which is actually very important, because recently we were in contact kind of casually, almost accidentally, I would say, with a community of fans, very young actually, like male teenagers who were working on drawings and reproducing the Wings art. And they actually found a way to digitize, to create a software to digitize the oldest animations, which are still kind of rudimentary in terms of digitization, because they are still broadcast on Rai Gulp, Rai, this kind of not international or not transnational channels. So this team actually contacted the Rainbow with a product. They wanted to produce, to help produce a digitization of the oldest series, and they were actually at the beginning welcomed by the Rainbow. The Rainbow worked with them, and then the Rainbow came out with their own project about it, and they kind of dismissed the team of teenagers. So there is this kind of really hard work about the archive and about making the Wings kind of more artistic, because recently there has been a sort of disaggregation of the quality of the Wings in terms of style and drawing. This is what actually the fans are saying. And so this is one phenomenon. Other phenomenons are the novels that they are writing, the porn spin-offs they are writing. There's so much about that. And one more thing I wanted to say, you were mentioning platforms. So we have the Rai channels, we have Netflix, and then the movies. Okay, so these are very different platforms. As we know, Netflix has kind of a specific kind of ideological design for TV series, and this is what they have been doing with Fate and the Wings saga, but also with World of Wings, the spin-off. There were so many interesting phenomenon with that, because there was the story of Peter Pan and Wendy in the spin-off. At the same time, there were some Italian anchors reproduced, graphically, which is a thing that is recognizable only by the Italian audience, is not the others. So for the Italians here, there is Morgan there, Sarah Maionchi. So these people are just presented as they are, very recognizable, but not from an international audience. So many interesting things happen in terms of platforms.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of our speakers. We still have a few minutes for questions from everyone else in the seminar. So I'm sure you do have questions for our speakers. So just raise your hand if there's anything you'd like to ask. Yes, Leonardo.
I have a question for both Nicoletta Mandolini and Nicoletta Marini-Maio and Ellen Nerenberg, sorry. So I don't know if there's enough time for that, but I'll do them anyway. I'll start with Nerenberg and Marini-Maio about Wings Club, because I was a child when Wings Club exploded in Italy. And now that I recall, more or less in the same period, there was also this very big collaboration between Barbie and Benetton with the release of these dolls characterized by different cities and different ethnicities and different clothes. And it was also the decade, essentially, of Gwen Stefani, who was very popular at that time for, evoking this potpourri of imageries of royalty and Japonism, which emerged also recently because she still doesn't acknowledge the cultural appropriation of Harajuku girls. And I was very fascinated by the notion of imagined communities associated with girlhood. And I was wondering if you could dig deeper into it, because I'm very, very interested on that. Shall I ask the question also to Nicoletta Mandolini, or?
Danielle, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I was sorry. Do that, Leonardo, yes. And
Okay.
then Nicoletta can have time to think.
Okay, so I'm a very big fan of Fumetti Brutti, as Danielle knows. I love her drawing style and the rawness of the narrative and how she talks about her body. There is this sketch in Anesthesia of an elephant being carried away by birds that moves me every time. But there is also this critique that a friend of mine stated about her, concerning the fact that, according to him, which is not necessarily my view, she kind of romanticizes sex with older men and pedophilia. So I am biased because, of course, I'm a fan, so I don't have the full picture and the emotional distance to not necessarily judge, but to critically see his concern. So I was wondering if you noticed this and how you respond to his critique, if you have diagnosed this problem into Fumetti Brutti's Romanzo Esplicito. I believe that maybe it's the volume in which this might seem a concern, maybe, I'm not sure. So yeah, thank you for your answers in advance.
Thanks, Leonardo. Yeah, speakers, do take your time to respond to these questions. I know we're going to run slightly over. Everybody knows it's fine to go when the time's up, but yeah, let's just answer these questions. Nicoletta and Ellen, do you want to start?
I just wanted to say that I'm really grateful for the reminder of the Barbie Benetton nexus, and also for the ways in which, I guess I'm thinking specifically of Benetton publicity in the 1980s, I suppose, right? The what were then surprising upending of certain conceptions of the limits of fashion. That is to say that fashion could allow itself to be utilized and plastic in that way, applicable in so many different ways. So I'm really struck by that. And, there are a lot of case studies of the Benetton publicity machine of the 1980s. And about the Japanese, I don't know enough about Gwen Stefani, and but only to say that if there had been another Winx that was added, I think she would have been an excellent candidate for one of the models, I think. She's not Pink, Lucy Liu. I mean, it's really literally Charlie's Angels and Harry Potter that's being merged there. But Beyonce and Jennifer Lopez, and before, had there been another, had Tekna, who deserves her own presentation, not gone in a different direction, we might have imagined Tekna, who is the Asian Winx, right? That had it not gone in the technical aspect, that it could have, that Gwen Stefani could have been a great source there. It's interesting to me, the disavowal of the source material that you're talking about, Leonardo. I don't know enough about it, but I'm really interested by it.
It's nothing academic. It's just suggestions from my childhood. So
no, it's really interesting to me. Nico, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
And building up on what Ellen was saying, I would also like to add that the imagined communities are concerning not only the text itself, but the extra diegetic design of the wings. If I can share again, I can show you some slides very quickly. This is, for instance, the and you can see Ellen and myself there. The Valmontone Wings Club Magic Land. So there is a world, a universe for the wings to be there, and then there are initiatives which are connected to the world of wings, but they are not actually animation series. They are real initiatives to connect to the neo-Catholic, neoliberalist Catholic world that we were talking about. We just mentioned that because we developed that in the article. We have a lot of phenomenons like sport, reunions, charities, that are really creating a community for real. It's just a very concrete element which is not relevant to the text, related to the text, but also again to the extra diegetic happenings.
And if I could just add, again, grateful for Leonardo's comment here. It seems obvious that Benetton was interested specifically in the affective impact of those ad campaigns as they shed light on, for example, the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. So I just, it seems really clear that that was a deliberate aim. To my knowledge, well, I don't know. Certainly Straffi would be very well versed about successful Italian transnational agencies. Aziende, in that case, he's extremely well versed in understanding transnational flows of capital and industry. So that would be another thing that would speak to a structural relation between those.
Thank you.
Nicoletta Mandolini, on Fumetti Brutti, what do you respond to this criticism?
Very much controversial, Fumetti Brutti. Thank you, Leonardo, for the question. I don't know, like I've never heard about this critique, Fumetti Brutti, as as it happens in Italy for everybody who is a successful figure, like is getting a lot of critiques. The most widespread, the one I've heard the most is about being narcissistic, self-centered because of the self-representation, all those white cisgender male academics critiques about autobiography that we are pretty accustomed with. But I've never heard these. Well, I think that it might be interpreted like that, but like if from a critical point of view, I have to say that if she romanticizes relationships, sexual relationships, and mostly abusive relationships with young older men, she definitely romanticizes violence in general. She romanticizes transphobia as well, if looked superficially. The truth, my idea is that actually, like Fumetti Brutti indulges in a process of auto-objectification, of a representation is devoted to the auto-objectification, which is something that is really helped by the medium of comics to some extent, because comics, especially autobiographical comics, there are works on that, do generally allow the person who is telling her own story to represent as seen from outside. As objectified, and this process of auto-objectification is particularly interesting because in my opinion, it allows her to represent her and denounce the objectification, but at the same time to reappropriate the narrative of that objectification, which is empowering, it kind of demonstrates some sort of agency, but does so in a pretty conflictual and still controversial and non pacificata maniera, okay, which I think is really interesting. Of course, there is another issue that I believe it might be taken into account, which has to do with the transsexual and transgender dimension of that representation and that narrative. I believe that one of the reasons why Fumetti Brutti chooses this type of representation, self-objectifying, even with when it comes to violence, transphobia, and relationships with older men, is that she wants to. It allows her to get not her a representation, to get a sense of belonging, belonging to the female gender, because the female gender is what is essentially victimized. I don't know if it's pretty complicated.
Thank you. That was super clear.
I try to explain all this in an article that I published in, I don't even remember the name of the journal, but it's one of the few articles existing on Fumetti Brutti.
I'll
So
read it.
it is open access. You can definitely access that somewhere.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicoletta. If you want to, and the same goes for Ellen and Nico, if you would like to forward any links to publications that you've mentioned in these talks, that would be great, because I could circulate those along with the recording, because I think both talks have stimulated so much interest in these areas. And I've been scribbling down furiously key words that I think we could return to in future discussion, as I've suggested or mentioned. I think it would be really great if we could get together in person in June. We have some provisional dates for that. We'll tell you more about the accommodation shortly, but we think it would be in Italy around the 19th, 20th, 21st of June, fingers crossed. But for those who can't attend in person, of course, we'll have longer online gatherings to follow up from that in September. But some wonderful keywords arising from this session. Thank you so much to our speakers. And I think our next meeting will be in March, I think March the 15th. So please let me know if you'd like to present in that session. I currently have some sort of provisional names, but nothing certain yet. Thanks for your time. Sorry we've run over slightly, but again, thank you for such a stimulating discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Ehi!
Say a quick hello.
Non era molto il mio ambito, c'è anche Romana mi ha scritto che non potevo usare camera e microfono.
She's still here, but yeah, I don't think she can.
Forse l'ha lasciato, non può.
Okay, fine. Anyway, I'll say hello.
Ok, I come back to
Ciao,
my
ci sono,
coding.
ci sono.
Ah, ciao
Aspetta,
Romana,
non ci
come
sono.
stai?
Insomma, sempre influenzata.
Hai preso l'australiana?
Boh, non lo so che razza è, ma comunque non ho voglia.
Mia,
pazzesca.
Romana, ti sento
Si
molto.
sente dalla voce.
Sì, però vabbè, insomma, mi sto riprendendo piano piano.
Ok,
Forza.
ci sentiamo allora.
Sì,
Vai.
sì, assolutamente.
Sì, cerca di riposarti, anche se so che sarà impossibile per te. Mi
Lo
spiace.
farò.
Ok, get well soon. Sorry.
Yeah, ok, see you soon, bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Noi avevamo riunione, no?
No, we don't have a meeting. We have a meeting next week, I think,
Next
Maria.
week,
so-
next Monday. Okay,
Yeah.
I come back to my coding. I was coding before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me too.
Started.
Yeah, I started and then I stopped.
I have a quick question that I don't understand the first thing, that is storytelling expectation.
No, I don't understand that either. I think we need to discuss that with Romana.
Okay, because I don't understand
No, I mean, I think it might be things like
what they expect from the project.
Yeah,
but they don't
what
speak.
they expect from a TV series. You know, maybe if they like happy endings or they like love stories that go well. That sort of thing.
Ok, in caso le rileggo, non
Yeah.
fa niente. Intanto vado avanti.
Okay.
Va bene, jet lag?
Insomma, ero sveglia alle 4 stamattina.
Ah, bella attiva.
Sì, sì.
No, io ho iniziato, mi si è sballata definitivamente la tiroide. E sì,
Yeah.
ho anche 2 noduli adesso, che però
sono normali da noi al sud Italia, sono una malattia abbastanza
Sì.
comune. Vabbè, almeno ho avuto le mie risposte del perché mi dimentico tutto. Infatti mi ha detto il medico, anzi che ancora parli con questi valori. Guardate le foto, quindi non è stato il Covid.
Ma prenditi qualche giorno di riposo, Maria, ti
No,
prego.
no, è ok. Ho iniziato l'Epirox.
Ok.
Mi ha fatto l'effetto opposto perché mi aveva detto il dottore, mi ha detto, vedi che ti potrebbe salire un po' la pressione, invece mi è scesa a 65, 6500. No, ma tanto stare seduto sul divano a lavorare, più che altro dovrò abbandonare, mi sa, un po' la corsa che avevo ripreso. No, fisicamente non ce la faccio. E niente, quindi ogni tanto mi vedrete un po' con me.
Mi dispiace.
Vabbè, ma ha detto che dura poco, il tempo
Ok.
che assesto il dosaggio e poi dice che torna a essere una bomba.
Allora, noi quando ci vediamo lunedì,
Sì,
va
sì,
bene?
tanto io sarò sempre a casa questa settimana e la prossima me la prendo un
Ok.
poco
Ok, perfetto.
calma per evitare, insomma, che mi sale la pressione o cose strane.
Adesso io devo andare a fare le spese perché è stata una giornata
Pure
pazzesca
io
di
scappo, che
riunione.
se ne
Ok,
dice. Ci sentiamo
grazie di
lunedì, io continuo
tutto.
col coding.
Sì, ok. E
Ciao,
stai bene. Ok,
un bacio a
ciao.
Nico, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.